There is a village that lives between two worlds, the hurried life of the city that sprawls inland and the eternal, slow wisdom of the sea. In this village lived a man named Mr. Elias. If wealth were a competition, Elias had won. His life was a monument to accumulation. He didn't just have money, he had more of everything. More land, more investments, more influence. Mr. Elias didn't just measure value in gold, he measured it in time spent earning. Every second of his day was an economic calculation. If a moment wasn't spent acquiring, securing, or compounding, it was a moment wasted. He knew the precise market value of every brick in his oversized manor, the exact cost of the imported silk in his suits, and the projected return on his newest venture. Yet despite his full ledgers and overflowing vaults, Mr. Elias carried a secret, a quiet, constant pressure in his chest, a feeling of running out. He was running out of time, running out of opportunities, running out of air. He owned the village, but he never actually lived in it. He believed he understood the entire equation of success. The only variable missing, he felt, was the complete submission of others to this same frantic chase. Down on the rough, tide-sculpted shore lived the complete antithesis of Mr. Elias, Silas, the old fisherman. Silas had what Elias considered nothing: a small, faded boat patched with old paint, a net that was more repair than original thread, a hut so simple it looked like it had grown right out of the sand. But every morning, before the coastal mist had fully lifted, Silas would launch his boat. He fished with intention. He knew the tides, he knew the currents, and he knew when enough was truly enough. He would catch what he needed to feed his wife, his children, and the small cluster of grandchildren who adored him. He would sell a small, reasonable portion at the market to buy flour and oil. And then, before the noon heat began to boil the sand, Silas would return. He spent his afternoons with his family, teaching the youngest ones how to tie complicated knots that resembled tiny, beautiful puzzles. He sat by the sea, not calculating, but simply listening to the waves crash. Sometimes he played a simple wooden flute, and the melodies were as old and peaceful as the ocean itself. To Mr. Elias, who saw this from his balcony, Silas was the definition of waste, a man squandering his potential. One crisp Tuesday morning, a day Mr. Elias had scheduled for maximizing stock profits, Silas returned to the shore with a haul that was truly extraordinary. The net was heavy, glistening, and bursting with the biggest, choicest fish of the season. It was a fisherman's dream. It was a potential fortune. Mr. Elias watched, already calculating the profit margins. This one haul could buy Silas a new engine for his boat, better gear, maybe even enough capital to start a small fishing cooperative. Silas, however, did something utterly bewildering. He carefully separated the dozen fish his family would eat. Then, with a slow, deliberate movement, he began to untangle the net and gently return the rest of the colossal catch, dozens upon dozens of valuable fish, back to the deep water. Mr. Elias's control snapped. He practically sprinted down the dune, his imported leather shoes sinking clumsily into the wet sand. "Silas, are you truly out of your mind?" Elias roared, his voice thin with panic and disbelief. "What kind of man returns a gold mine to the ocean?" Silas straightened up, his hands wet and smelling of salt. His eyes, crinkled by years of sun and laughter, met the frantic gaze of the rich man. "Good morning, Mr. Elias," Silas said, his voice calm, untouched by the rush of the market. "I am returning them so they may live, and so I may rest." "Rest?" Elias shrieked. "Rest? You could sell this catch right now. You could secure your family for a year. You could buy a larger boat, hire 2 men, catch 10 times this much. In 5 years, Silas, you could retire. You wouldn't have to work another day in your life. Elias gestured wildly toward the city, sprawling in the distance. "That is the promise of wealth, freedom, security. Don't you see the simple success story you are throwing away?" Silas stood silently, letting the rich man's frantic words dissolve in the sea air. "And what would I do then, Mr. Elias, when I am retired?" Silas finally asked, his voice softer than the incoming tide. Elias sputtered. "Why, you'd be free. You'd be able to do what you love. You could relax. You could spend your days exactly how you wish, without any worry of the next meal." Silas sat down on an overturned bucket, wiping his hands on his simple canvas trousers. He didn't mock. He didn't preach. He just looked at the sun, which was now warm and bright on the water. "Mr. Elias," Silas whispered, pointing toward the bright, clear sky, "tell me, what am I doing right now?" Elias was dumbfounded. You are sitting here. You are wasting time. You are making a terrible economic error." "No," Silas gently corrected him. "I am sitting here feeling the sun on my skin. I am talking to a neighbor. I'm going to mend my nets with my son, and later I will play music for my grandchildren and watch them laugh." He paused, letting the silence fill the space between them. "The freedom you say I would earn in 5 years, by losing 5 years of my life to the chase, I already have it today, Mr. Elias. This is my time. This is my life." The sound of the distant city traffic suddenly felt meaningless. The constant rhythmic ticking in Mr. Elias's mind seemed to skip a beat. Mr. Elias, the man who had quantified everything, realized that he had never, not once, counted the hours of joy, the minutes of peace, or the seconds of true, unburdened freedom. He had been so obsessed with creating a cushion for a future life that he had entirely neglected the life he was living now. His life was full of objects, but empty of moments. He was a slave to the very wealth he had worked so hard to acquire. The gold bars in his vault were not a measure of his success, but a cage for his soul. Silas rose, giving his boat a final pat. "You own a lot of things, Mr. Elias," he said, his voice carrying the wisdom of the ages, "but do your things own you?" This question, simple and profound, hit the rich man harder than any market crash could have. It was a life lesson administered not by a professor or a consultant, but by a poor man who knew the true meaning of enough. Mr. Elias walked back to his grand house that day, but he was a different man. He began leaving his desk early. He started walking on the beach, not to calculate its value, but to watch the sunset's free, unpurchasable beauty. He learned that the deepest security is not found in accumulation, but in contentment. True wealth is not measured by what you have in the bank, but by how richly you can live in the present moment. It is a measure of peace, not possession.